A frightened bear cub wanders into a school, leaving students stunned. The teacher's bold decision next will leave everyone speechless. And if you cherish your family and love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and avoid 10 years of bad luck. The familiar sounds of children's laughter echoed through the halls of Maplewood Elementary on what seemed like an ordinary spring morning. Miss Sarah Jenkins' third-grade classroom buzzed with the usual energy of 24 students engaged in their morning activities. The windows were open, letting in a gentle breeze that carried the scent of blooming dogwood trees from the schoolyard. At precisely 9:15 a.m., while Sarah was writing the day's schedule on the whiteboard, a collective gasp from her students made her turn around. There, in the doorway, stood a small brown bear cub, its wet nose twitching as it surveyed the classroom. The bear, later identified as Buddy, had somehow managed to wander through the school's open back door and found his way to room 302. The initial reaction was exactly what you'd expect in a room full of 8-year-olds. Some students scrambled onto their chairs, others froze in place, and a few excited whispers of "Bear! Bear!" circulated through the room. However, what happened next was far from typical. Sarah Jenkins, drawing from her 15 years of teaching experience and countless crisis management workshops, did something that would later be praised by wildlife experts. Instead of triggering the panic button under her desk or causing alarm, Sarah maintained a remarkable composure. She spoke in the same gentle, measured tone she used during story time, making slow, deliberate movements as she positioned herself between the bear cub and her students. "Everyone," she whispered, keeping her eyes on the curious visitor, "let's all stay very quiet and still, just like we practiced during our mindfulness exercises." The children, responding to their teacher's calm demeanor, followed her lead. The atmosphere in the room shifted from chaos to a strange sort of peaceful tension. Buddy, seemingly more interested than aggressive, took a few tentative steps into the classroom. His small claws made a soft clicking sound against the linoleum floor. Sarah began talking to Buddy in soothing tones, sharing a running commentary with her class about the bear's natural curiosity. "You see how he's exploring?" she whispered, using this unprecedented situation as an impromptu teaching moment. Bears are naturally curious animals. They use their excellent sense of smell to investigate new places. As Buddy sniffed around the classroom's reading corner, Sarah carefully reached for her phone, managing to send a quick text to the school office without making any sudden movements. Meanwhile, she continued engaging her students in quiet observation, turning what could have been a frightening experience into an educational opportunity. "Notice how he moves," she guided them, her voice steady and professional. "Bears might look clumsy, but they're actually very graceful animals." The students watched, mesmerized, as Buddy investigated a colorful poster about the water cycle, his small head tilting as if trying to understand the diagram. The initial terror had transformed into fascination as the children observed the bear cub's behavior. Even Tommy Martinez, known for his fear of the class hamster, found himself leaning forward in his seat to get a better look. Sarah used this moment to begin slowly guiding the bear toward the door, using her knowledge of animal behavior to avoid any sudden movements that might startle him. What made this situation particularly remarkable was how Sarah maintained control while simultaneously teaching. She pointed out Buddy's body language, explaining how animals communicate through movement and posture. This impromptu lesson would later become the foundation for something much larger, though neither Sarah nor her NTS could have predicted that at the time. The tension in the room remained palpable, but controlled, like a held breath waiting to be released. Through the windows, movement could be seen as school staff began to gather outside. But inside room 302, time seemed to stand still in this extraordinary moment between human and wildlife. The transition from classroom to schoolyard happened with remarkable efficiency. The school's emergency protocols kicked in smoothly, though this particular situation hadn't been covered in any of their drills. Students filed out in orderly lines, maintaining the quiet atmosphere Sarah had established, while Buddy followed at a curious distance, drawn by the movement. The spring air felt different now, charged with excitement and nervous energy. The schoolyard, typically used for recess games and physical education, transformed into an impromptu wildlife observation area. Students gathered in a wide semicircle, maintaining a safe distance as instructed by the newly arrived school administrators. Parents who had been notified of the situation began arriving at the school's perimeter, many staying to watch the unusual scene unfold. Sarah, now standing before her class in the outdoor setting, seamlessly transformed the potentially dangerous situation into an educational opportunity. She began sharing facts about black bears, their habitat, and behavior patterns, drawing from her own knowledge and the environmental education workshops she'd attended over the years. Black bears, she explained, gesturing toward Buddy, who was now investigating a nearby bush, are omnivores. Does anyone know what that means? Several hands shot up, but it was Tom Wheeler's hesitant half-raised hand that caught her attention. Tom, a quiet student who rarely participated in class discussions, sat near the back of the group, his eyes fixed on the bear cub. They eat everything? Tom's voice, though barely above a whisper, carried across the suddenly silent schoolyard. His question opened the floodgates for a discussion about bear diets, habitat, and survival strategies. Sarah nodded encouragingly. That's right, Tom. Bears eat both plants and animals. In the wild, they forage for berries, nuts, and insects. Sometimes they catch fish or small animals. She paused, noting how the students leaned forward, their fear giving way to curiosity. They're actually excellent problem solvers when it comes to finding food. The impromptu lesson continued as Buddy demonstrated natural bear behaviors, sniffing the ground and investigating his surroundings. Sarah used each movement as a teaching point, explaining how bears use their keen sense of smell to locate food sources, how they mark territory, and why they might wander into human areas. Tom, emboldened by his initial success, raised his hand again. But Ms. Jenkins, if bears are so good at finding food in the forest, why did Buddy come to our school? The question hung in the air, profound in its simplicity. Other students nodded, equally curious about the answer. Sarah took a moment to consider her response, aware that her answer would shape her students' understanding of human-wildlife interaction. That's an excellent question, Tom. Sometimes, when human developments expand into natural habitats, bears and other wildlife find their traditional food sources and territories disrupted. They might venture into human areas out of necessity or curiosity. The discussion evolved as more students began asking questions. How far can bears smell? Do they hibernate all winter? What do baby bears learn from their mothers? Each question revealed not just curiosity about Buddy, but a growing awareness of wildlife and environmental issues. Parents and teachers watching from the sidelines noticed something remarkable happening. The initial panic had transformed into an engaged, impromptu environmental science lesson. Even students who typically struggled to focus during regular classes were completely absorbed in the discussion. Tom, who had rarely spoken more than a few words in class before, continued to ask thoughtful questions about bear behavior and habitat. His unexpected engagement served as a catalyst for other, typically quiet students to join the discussion. The usual social dynamics of the classroom shifted as students who were normally overshadowed by more outgoing classmates found their voices. Throughout the discussion, Buddy remained visible but at a safe distance, providing a living example of the topics being discussed. His presence added an authenticity to the lesson that no textbook or video could match. The students observed his natural behaviors while learning about the importance of respecting wildlife and understanding their needs. The scene in the schoolyard that morning would later be remembered as more than just an unusual interruption to the school day. It marked the beginning of a transformation in how the students viewed their relationship with the natural world, though none of them realized yet just how significant this encounter would become. Once the initial excitement of the outdoor lesson subsided and wildlife officials confirmed it was safe, the students returned to their classroom. The energy had shifted dramatically from the morning's chaos. Instead of resuming their regular schedule, Sarah recognized an opportunity to channel the students' heightened interest in wildlife into something tangible. Take out your art supplies, Sarah instructed, distributing large sheets of drawing paper. Today, we're going to imagine and draw Buddy's life in the forest. The rustling of papers and clicking of supply boxes filled the room as students prepared their materials. The usual chatter that accompanied art time was replaced with a focused concentration. The classroom transformed into an impromptu art studio. Students hunched over their desks, colored pencils and markers in hand, each interpreting their morning encounter through art. Sarah moved between the desks, observing how each child processed the experience differently through their drawings. Madison drew an elaborate forest scene with Buddy fishing in a stream, remembering the discussion about bears' eating habits. Next to her, Derek Thompson focused on creating a detailed den, complete with pine needles and fallen leaves. Each drawing revealed not just artistic expression, but understanding of the morning's environmental lessons. What struck Sarah most was how the students incorporated scientific details from their earlier discussion into their artwork. They weren't just drawing cute bears. They were creating habitats, food sources, and seasonal changes. Without prompting, many students included other forest animals, showing an understanding of ecosystem interconnections. Tom, who had surprised everyone with his questions in the schoolyard, worked intensely on his drawing. His paper showed Buddy in different scenarios, foraging for berries, climbing trees, and interacting with other wildlife. The typically reserved student had found a new way to express his thoughts about nature. As the art session progressed, spontaneous discussions broke out among the students. They shared facts they remembered about bears, correcting each other's misconceptions and building on their collective knowledge. Bears don't really eat that much meat, one student would point out, or they need more trees in their habitat, another would suggest. Sarah introduced a sharing circle, where students could present their artwork and explain their choices. This simple activity revealed how deeply the morning's events had affected them. Students who usually rushed through assignments took time to add details like specific plants bears eat or seasonal changes in the forest. The conversations naturally evolved into discussions about environmental preservation. Where will Buddy live if they build more houses in the forest? Asked S. Ophie Martinez, voicing a concern that seemed to resonate with many of her classmates. Similar questions began emerging. What happens to bears in winter when their dens are destroyed? How do they find food when humans take their land? These questions led to impromptu brainstorming sessions about what they could do to help protect wildlife. Students suggested ideas ranging from recycling programs to habitat preservation projects. Their artwork became more than just pictures. They were statements about environmental awareness. Parents arriving for afternoon pickup found their children unusually animated about their school day. Instead of the typical nothing much response to "What did you do today?" students eagerly shared their drawings and newly acquired knowledge about bears and forest ecosystems. The art session accomplished something unexpected. It helped students process the morning's excitement while deepening their understanding of environmental issues. Their drawings weren't just representations of a bear they'd seen. They were windows into how children view the relationship between humans and wildlife. Sarah collected the artwork at the end of the day, planning to create a display that would document this extraordinary day. What she didn't realize was that these drawings would become the foundation for something much larger, a catalyst for change that would extend far beyond the walls of their classroom. The simple act of drawing had transformed fear into understanding, curiosity into awareness, and a random encounter with wildlife into a powerful learning experience. As Sarah pinned the last drawing to the bulletin board, she noticed how the students lingered, discussing their artwork and sharing ideas about helping wildlife. The classroom had become a space where environmental consciousness was taking root, though no one yet knew how far these seeds would grow. The arrival of the wildlife officials marked a shift from spontaneous learning to structured education. Two officers from the Department of Wildlife Conservation, Dr. Maria Rodriguez and Officer James Chun, entered the classroom carrying containers of educational materials and wildlife monitoring equipment. Their timing was perfect. The students had just finished their art session and were primed for more information about their morning visitor. Dr. Rodriguez, a veteran wildlife biologist with 15 years of field experience, immediately noticed the detailed drawings covering the classroom walls. She paused to examine them, nodding appreciatively at the scientific accuracy many students had included. "I can see you've already learned quite a bit about bears," she began, setting up a portable projector. Officer Chin distributed wildlife information packets while Dr. Rodriguez prepared her presentation. These weren't the usual generic handouts. They had been quickly customized to address the specific situation the class had experienced with Buddy. The presentation began with thermal imaging footage of local bear populations, showing how wildlife officials track and monitor bears in their natural habitat. Students who had been drawing imagined scenes of Buddy's forest life now saw real evidence of how bears behave in the wild. The thermal footage revealed bears climbing trees, foraging for food, and interacting with their cubs. Dr. Rodriguez explained the sophisticated tracking methods used to monitor local wildlife. She showed the class radio collars and tracking devices, explaining how they help scientists understand animal movement patterns and protect both wildlife and human communities. The students handled deactivated tracking devices, examining them with careful curiosity. Every bear has a story, Officer Chen explained, pulling up a map showing local bear migration patterns. When we understand their stories, where they go, what they need to survive, we can better protect them and their habitats. He pointed out how urban development NT had created islands of forest, forcing bears to navigate between fragmented habitats. The discussion turned technical as Dr. Rodriguez explained the process of safely relocating wildlife. She described the specialized equipment, medical checks, and careful planning required to ensure an animal's successful return to its natural habitat. The students learned about tranquilizer darts, health assessments, and the importance of choosing the right release location. During the question and answer session, the officials addressed concerns about Buddy's future. They explained the careful evaluation process that would determine whether he could be safely returned to the wild. The students learned about rehabilitation centers, wildlife sanctuaries, and the network of professionals dedicated to protecting wild animals. Tom, maintaining his newfound role as class wildlife enthusiast, asked about success rates for bear rehabilitation. His question led to a broader discussion about conservation statistics, habitat preservation, and the importance of community involvement in wildlife protection efforts. The officials shared real cases of successful wildlife rehabilitation, but they didn't shy away from discussing challenges. They explained how human expansion into natural areas creates ongoing conflicts with wildlife, emphasizing the need for educated communities that understand how to coexist with wild animals. Throughout the presentation, Sarah noticed her students taking detailed notes, something they rarely did during regular lessons. The officials' expertise and real-world experience brought authenticity to the morning's impromptu lessons about wildlife. Even the most restless students remained engaged, particularly when Officer Chen demonstrated how to use tracking equipment. As the presentation concluded, Dr. Rodriguez unveiled a surprise. The department would be installing wildlife cameras in the school's surrounding area. These cameras would help track local animal populations and provide data for the school's science classes. The announcement transformed what could have been a one-time incident into an ongoing learning opportunity. The officials left behind not just information packets and safety guidelines, but also a heightened sense of responsibility among the students. They had walked in as experts sharing information, but departed as partners in what was becoming a larger mission of environmental education and wildlife protection. What no one realized yet was how this professional intervention would influence not just the students' understanding of wildlife, but their future actions and the entire community's approach to conservation. The seeds of change had been planted, though the full harvest was still to come. Following the wildlife officials' visit, Sarah's class channeled their newfound environmental awareness into action. The idea emerged during their morning circle time. They would transform an unused section of the school grounds into a wildlife-friendly garden. What started as a simple suggestion quickly evolved into a full-scale project that would test their planning skills and environmental knowledge. Sarah cleared a large section of the whiteboard and began facilitating a structured brainstorming session. Students who had never shown interest in gardening before now eagerly contributed ideas. The usually rigid classroom seating arrangement shifted as students clustered around the planning area, armed with notebooks and the wildlife information packets from the previous day. "We need plants that help animals," announced Lisa Chun, who had already started researching on the classroom tablet. different plants for different seasons. Her suggestion sparked a detailed discussion about local flora and its role in supporting wildlife. The class began categorizing plants based on their benefits: food sources, shelter providers, and pollinator attractors. The planning process revealed unexpected complexity. Students learned that creating a wildlife-friendly garden wasn't just about planting flowers. They needed to consider water sources, safe corridors for animal movement, and the potential risks of attracting wildlife too close to the school building. Sarah guided them through these considerations, helping them balance their enthusiasm with practical safety concerns. Tom, continuing to emerge from his shell, took charge of researching native plants. He compiled a list of species that would provide food and shelter for local wildlife while requiring minimal maintenance. His research revealed that native plants would not only support local animals, but would also conserve water and resist local pests naturally. The class divided into specialized teams, each focusing on different aspects of the garden. The plant selection team researched suitable native species. The design team sketched layout plans considering sunlight and water access. The budget team calculated costs and began planning fundraising efforts. The wildlife support team focused on features like bird baths and butterfly putting stations. Sarah watched as natural leaders emerged in unexpected places. Students who struggled with traditional academics showed remarkable skill in practical planning and organization. The project began breaking down social barriers as students regrouped based on interests rather than usual friendship circles. The garden design evolved into something more sophisticated than anyone had initially imagined. Students incorporated learning stations where younger classes could study wildlife, hidden observation points for watching birds safely, and specialized zones for different types of plants. They even planned a small pond feature after learning about the importance of water sources for wildlife. Mathematical skills came into play as students calculated area measurements and plant spacing. Science lessons about soil composition and plant biology found practical application. The project naturally integrated multiple subjects, making abstract classroom concepts suddenly relevant and engaging. Parents began hearing about the project from their excited children. Several offered to help, bringing professional expertise in landscaping, construction, and environmental science. The garden was becoming more than a class project. It was evolving into a community initiative. Sarah guided the class through creating a formal proposal for the school administration. Students learned about budgeting, project timelines, and the importance of addressing potential concerns proactively. They prepared presentations explaining how the garden would benefit not just wildlife, but also serve as an outdoor classroom for the entire school. The planning process revealed how much the students had absorbed from their encounter with Buddy and the subsequent wildlife presentation. They understood that their garden wouldn't attract bears, and shouldn't, but could provide crucial support for local birds, butterflies, and small mammals. Their design reflected a sophisticated understanding of ecosystem relationships. As the plans took shape on paper, excitement built among the students. They weren't just planning a garden. They were creating a legacy that would benefit both the school and local wildlife for years to come. The project had transformed from a simple reaction to Buddy's visit into something far more significant. What they didn't realize was that their garden project would soon capture attention far beyond the school grounds, becoming a model for other schools and communities. The seeds of change they were planting would grow into something much larger than anyone had anticipated. The transformation of the school grounds began on a crisp Saturday morning, with students, parents, and teachers arriving armed with gardening tools and determined expressions. What had existed on paper for weeks was finally becoming reality. The unused patch of land, Previa, lying nothing more than patchy grass and scattered weeds, was about to become something extraordinary. The initial groundbreaking revealed the first of many challenges. The soil was harder than expected, riddled with rocks and old roots. Instead of discouraging the students, these obstacles sparked innovative problem-solving. They organized relay systems for removing rocks, created sorting stations for different materials, and developed efficient methods for preparing the soil. Throughout the work, students began noticing wildlife they'd never paid attention to before. A pair of cardinals watched from nearby trees, sparrows investigated the freshly turned earth, and various insects emerged from the soil. Each discovery led to impromptu discussions about ecosystem relationships and the importance of even the smallest creatures. Tom, the formerly quiet student, emerged as an unexpected leader during this phase. His thorough research on native plants and wildlife habits made him the go-to expert for planning decisions. He organized his classmates into efficient working groups, demonstrating a natural ability to delegate tasks and solve problems. His voice, once barely heard in class, now carried confidently across the garden site as he explained proper planting techniques and plant identification. The students' knowledge expanded beyond their initial research. They learned to identify beneficial insects, understand soil composition, and recognize signs of wildlife activity. Every discovery became a teaching moment, with students eagerly sharing their observations with classmates. The garden site transformed into an outdoor classroom where theoretical knowledge met practical application. Parents and community members noticed the changes in the students. Children who had never shown interest in nature now came home discussing soil pH levels and butterfly migration patterns. The project was developing more than just a garden. It was cultivating future environmental stewards. The work sessions became community events. Families brought picnic lunches, local experts offered advice, and even residents without children at the school stopped by to observe and contribute. The garden project was breaking down barriers between the school and the broader community, creating connections through shared purpose. As the garden took shape, species identification became a favorite activity. Students created detailed logs of every bird, insect, and small animal they observed. They noted behavioral patterns, preferred plants, and interaction between species. Their observations reflected a growing understanding of ecosystem complexity. Tom organized a system for documenting the garden's progress. Students took daily photographs, recorded weather conditions, and tracked plant growth rates. Their record-keeping evolved into a sophisticated database that would prove valuable for future classes and research projects. The physical labor of creating the garden built more than just planting beds and walking paths. It developed teamwork skills, problem-solving abilities, and resilience. Students who struggled with traditional academics found success in practical applications of scientific principles. The garden became a place where different types of intelligence and skill sets were equally valued. Local media began taking notice. A reporter from the town newspaper visited, interviewing students about their project. Tom, speaking with newfound confidence, explained how the garden would support local wildlife while providing educational opportunities. His articulate responses and obvious expertise impressed the reporter, leading to a feature article that would catch the attention of environmental organizations. The garden's design incorporated learning spaces where students could observe and study wildlife safely. These areas became popular spots during breaks, with students voluntarily spending their free time watching birds, identifying insects, and recording their observations in nature journals. Sarah observed these developments with pride, particularly noting Tom's transformation. The timid student who had barely spoken during class discussions was now leading wildlife workshops for younger students. His knowledge and enthusiasm inspired others, creating a ripple effect of environmental awareness throughout the school. As spring progressed, the garden began showing signs of success. Native plants took root, insects buzzed between flowers, and birds started visiting regularly. Each new development validated the students' hard work and research. They weren't just creating a garden, they were rebuilding a small ecosystem. The project's success was beginning to attract attention from unexpected places, though no one yet realized how far its influence would spread. What had started as a response to Buddy's visit was evolving into something that would challenge traditional approaches to environmental education and community engagement. The invitation from the town council arrived on official letterhead, requesting Sarah and her students to present their wildlife garden project at the next City Hall meeting. The council chamber, typically reserved for municipal planning and budget discussions, would now host a group of enthusiastic third graders eager to share their environmental initiative. Sarah worked with her students to prepare a professional presentation. The children meticulously gathered their documentation, growth charts, wildlife observation logs, and before and after photographs of the garden site. What impressed her most was how naturally they translated their hands-on experience into formal presentation material. The evening of the presentation transformed City Hall. Instead of the usual audience of concerned citizens and local officials, the chamber filled with families, teachers, and community members curious about the project that had garnered so much local attention. The students, dressed in their best clothes, arranged their display boards and digital presentations with surprising professionalism. Tom, selected by his classmates as lead presenter, approached the podium with newfound confidence. Though his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the microphone, his voice remained steady as he began describing their journey from Buddy's unexpected visit to the creation of their wildlife garden. The presentation included detailed data about local wildlife populations, native plant species, and the importance of urban wildlife corridors. Students took turns explaining different aspects of the project, showcasing their expertise in various areas. They presented charts showing increased bird and butterfly populations in the area, graphs of plant growth rates, and documentation of their sustainable gardening practices. City council members, typically stoic during presentations, found themselves engaged by the students' enthusiasm and knowledge. When Tom explained how their garden design could be replicated in other schools and public spaces, several council members began taking notes. The children weren't just sharing a school project. They were presenting a viable model for community-wide environmental improvement. The question and answer session revealed the depth of the students' understanding. When asked about maintenance costs, they provided detailed budget breakdowns. Questions about safety concerns were met with well-researched protocols for managing wildlife interactions. They had answers for everything from plant selection criteria to community engagement strategies. Sarah watched from the sidelines as her students handled complex questions with remarkable poise. These were the same children who, months ago, had panicked at the sight of a bear cub in their classroom. Now they spoke confidently about wildlife behavior, ecosystem management, and environmental conservation. The council members' response exceeded expectations. What started as a courtesy presentation evolved into a serious discussion about expanding the project. Council members proposed implementing similar gardens in other schools and public spaces throughout the city. The students' model would serve as a template for future environmental initiatives. Local environmental organizations in attendance offered support and resources. A representative from the state's conservation department expressed interest in documenting the project as a case study in environmental education. The students' work was catalyzing change at a level no one had anticipated. Parents in the audience beamed with pride as their children fielded questions and shared their expertise. Many admitted to learning from their children over the past months, changing their own behaviors regarding wildlife and environmental conservation. The project had created a reverse mentorship, with students educating their families about environmental responsibility. The presentation concluded with an unexpected announcement from the mayor. The city would establish an annual environmental education grant, inspired by the success of the Wildlife Garden project. Future students would have resources to develop their own environmental initiatives, ensuring the project's impact would continue growing. As the meeting adjourned, council members and community leaders crowded around the students' display boards, asking questions and taking photographs. Local media captured the moment, but more importantly, they captured the story of how a chance encounter with wildlife had sparked a community-wide movement toward environmental conservation. Walking back to their parents' cars after the presentation, the students couldn't contain their excitement. They had entered City Hall as elementary school students and left as recognized environmental advocates. Yet none of them realized that the most surprising development in their journey was still to come. The day of the garden's official inauguration dawned bright and clear, as if nature itself approved of the celebration. The school grounds buzzed with activity from early morning as volunteers set up tables, hung banners, and arranged displays. What had started as a simple garden opening had evolved into a full-scale community environmental festival. The transformed space barely resembled the barren patch of land from a few months ago. Native flowers bloomed in carefully planned clusters, creating ribbons of color throughout the garden. Wood chip paths wound between raised beds, leading visitors through different ecological zones. Each area featured educational placards designed by the students, explaining the role of various plants and animals in the local ecosystem. Local businesses and environmental organizations had set up booths around the garden's perimeter. A local nursery provided demonstrations on sustainable gardening techniques. The wildlife department brought educational displays about local fauna, including a live owl presentation that drew crowds of fascinated visitors. The city's sustainability office distributed information about reducing human-wildlife conflicts in urban areas. The students, wearing green t-shirts with their project logo, took turns leading tour groups through the garden. They had practiced their presentations extensively, but their enthusiasm made each tour feel spontaneous and engaging. Tom, especially, shone as he explained the garden's different features, his previous shyness completely forgotten as he shared his passion for wildlife conservation. Interactive stations dotted the garden, each managed by student experts. At one station, visitors learned to identify native plant species. Another taught proper composting techniques. A popular spot featured a demonstration of the wildlife cameras installed around the school grounds, showing footage of nocturnal visitors to the garden. The celebration included practical workshops where community members could learn to create their own wildlife-friendly spaces. Students demonstrated how to build bird feeders from recycled materials, construct butterfly pudding stations, and create beneficial insect hotels. Parents watched in amazement as their children confidently taught adults about ecological gardening principles. Local musicians provided background music, their acoustic sets creating a festive atmosphere without disturbing the garden's wildlife. Food vendors offered locally sourced refreshments, with an emphasis on environmental sustainability. Even the serving materials were compostable, demonstrating the students' commitment to environmental responsibility. The mayor arrived mid-morning to officially inaugurate the garden. During the ceremony, she announced that the city would be implementing similar projects in other schools, using this garden as a model. The students' initiative had sparked a citywide movement toward environmental education and wildlife conservation. Throughout the day, visitors could observe real evidence of the garden's success. Butterflies fluttered between flowers, birds visited the feeding stations, and beneficial insects buzzed around the pollinator gardens. The students had created more than just a beautiful space. They had restored a functioning ecosystem in the heart of their school grounds. Community members took turns sharing stories of how the project had influenced their own environmental awareness. Parents spoke about their children's transformation into environmental advocates. Neighbors described how the garden had inspired them to modify their own yards to support wildlife. Teachers from other schools asked questions about implementing similar programs. The celebration peaked when Sarah unveiled a special addition to the garden, a dedication plaque. The plaque honored not just the students' hard work, but also acknowledged Buddy, the unexpected visitor whose appearance had catalyzed the entire project. The inscription read, "From unexpected encounters grow extraordinary changes." As the day progressed, the event took on the feeling of a community festival. Children played environmental education games, families picnicked on the lawn, and neighbors who had never spoken before found themselves deep in conversation about gardening and wildlife conservation. The garden had become more than an educational space. It was a catalyst for community connection. The local newspaper's photographer captured countless moments throughout the day. Students teaching adults about native plants, children watching in wonder as butterflies landed on flowers they had planted, families working together to build bird feeders. Each image told part of the story of how a school project had transformed into a community movement. As the celebration drew to a close, visitors lingered in the garden, reluctant to leave the peaceful space they had helped create. What none of them realized was that this day marked not the end of their journey, but rather a new beginning. The garden's greatest impact was yet to be revealed. In the midst of the garden celebration's cleanup, Sarah received an urgent call from Dr. Rodriguez at the Department of Wildlife Conservation. She stepped away from the remaining festivities, finding a quiet corner near the school building to take the call. The news she received would add an unexpected layer to their already remarkable story. The Wildlife Department had been monitoring Buddy's progress since his relocation to a natural habitat several months ago. Despite their best efforts and most experienced handlers, Buddy showed persistent signs of struggling with wild reintegration. The bear cub's behavior patterns indicated he had likely been orphaned at a very young age, missing crucial survival skills typically taught by mother bears. Sarah listened intently as Dr. Rodriguez explained the situation. The department had tried various rehabilitation techniques, but Buddy continued to seek human contact and showed limited ability to forage effectively. The decision had been made to transfer him to a permanent wildlife sanctuary where he could live safely while contributing to educational programs about human-wildlife interaction. The news hit Sarah hard. She knew her students had been imagining Buddy roaming freely in the forest, living the wild life they had depicted in their artwork months ago. Breaking this news to them would be challenging, particularly given their deep investment in wildlife conservation over the past months. When Sarah gathered the remaining students and parents to share the update, the response surprised her. Instead of disappointment, she witnessed something unexpected. Tom, who had been collecting leftover materials from the celebration, stepped forward with a thoughtful expression. "Can we visit him?" he asked, surprising everyone with the practical nature of his question. Maybe we could learn about why some animals can't go back to the wild and what sanctuaries do to help them. Other students quickly joined in, building on Tom's suggestion with their own ideas about how to turn this news into another learning opportunity. The conversation shifted from disappointment to problem solving. Students began discussing the complex realities of wildlife rehabilitation. They asked sophisticated questions about success rates, adaptation challenges, and the role of wildlife sanctuaries in conservation efforts. Their response demonstrated how far they had come from their initial fear of a bear in their classroom. Parents joined the discussion, offering suggestions about organizing field trips to the sanctuary and potentially establishing a partnership between the school and the facility. What could have been a disheartening moment transformed into another opportunity for community engagement and education. Sarah watched as her students processed this news with remarkable maturity. They understood that not every wildlife story has a perfect ending, but that didn't make their conservation efforts any less valuable. If anything, it strengthened their resolve to understand and protect wildlife habitats. The students began brainstorming ways to support the sanctuary where Buddy would live. Ideas ranged from fundraising initiatives to educational outreach programs. They saw this development not as a failure, but as an extension of their project's mission to promote wildlife conservation and education. Dr. Rodriguez, still on the phone, heard the students' reactions through the speaker. She explained that the sanctuary would welcome their involvement, suggesting that Buddy's story could help educate others about the complexities of human-wildlife relationships and the importance of habitat preservation. As the news spread among the remaining celebration attendees, it sparked discussions about responsible wildlife interaction and the challenges of conservation work. Adults and children alike engaged in thoughtful conversations about the balance between helping wildlife and maintaining appropriate boundaries. The day that had begun as a celebration of their garden project was ending with a deeper understanding of wildlife conservation's complexities. Yet even this seemingly disappointing news served to strengthen the community's commitment to environmental education and wildlife protection. What no one realized was that this development would lead to one final discovery, one that would tie their entire journey together in an unexpected way. The next piece of information would reveal that Buddy's story was more significant than anyone had imagined. The discovery happened during the final moments of the celebration cleanup. Tom, diligently checking the garden area for any leftover materials, spotted something unusual beneath a shrub, a small, professional-grade wildlife camera. It wasn't one of the new installations from their garden project. This one bore the Department of Wildlife Conservation's official tags. "Ms. Jenkins," Tom called out, carefully retrieving the device. Sarah and several remaining parents gathered around as Tom handled the camera with the expertise he developed over the past months. Dr. Rodriguez, still available on speakerphone, confirmed it belonged to her department, a camera that had gone missing during Buddy's initial capture and relocation. With guidance from Dr. Rodriguez, they connected the camera to the school's computer lab. What they found on its memory card changed everything they thought they knew about their unexpected visitor. The footage, dating back several months before Buddy's classroom appearance, told a remarkable story. Buddy wasn't just any orphan bear cub. He was part of a pioneering wildlife study focusing on urban wildlife adaptation. His mother, wearing a research tracking collar, had been a key subject in the department's research on bear behavior in developing areas. The camera had captured footage of her teaching Buddy survival skills until she disappeared during a period of heavy construction in their territory. But the most stunning revelation came from footage recorded just days before Buddy's school visit. It showed him following his mother's old tracking signal directly to the school grounds. The construction that had separated them had driven his mother through this same area. Buddy hadn't randomly wandered into the school. He had been following his mother's scent trail. The footage revealed something else extraordinary. The area where the students had built their wildlife garden was previously a natural corridor used by local wildlife, including Buddy's mother, before urban development disrupted their paths. Without realizing it, the students had restored a crucial wildlife passage, one that had existed long before their school was built. Tom, watching the footage with intense concentration, made another connection. The native plants they had selected for their garden, the ones he had researched so carefully, were the same species that appeared in the footage of Buddy and his mother foraging months earlier. Their garden wasn't just supporting wildlife. It was recreating an essential habitat that had been lost. Dr. Rodriguez explained that this discovery made their garden project even more significant. They had unknowingly reestablished a vital wildlife corridor, creating a model for how urban development and wildlife conservation could coexist. The garden's success wasn't just about education anymore. It was demonstrating real ecological restoration. The revelation about Buddy's identity and purpose transformed the narrative of their entire experience. What seemed like a random incident had actually been part of a larger story about wildlife adaptation, habitat loss, and the unexpected ways nature finds to survive in changing environments. Their garden wasn't just a school project. It was rebuilding a broken link in the local ecosystem. Sarah watched her students process this information with growing understanding. They had started this journey afraid of a bear in their classroom. Now they were part of a groundbreaking study in urban wildlife conservation. The story of Buddy, once a tale of an unexpected visitor, had become a powerful lesson in how human actions, both destructive and restorative, impact the natural world. As the final pieces of the story fell into place, the students realized their work was far from over. Buddy's new home at the sanctuary wouldn't be the end of his contribution to wildlife conservation. His story, and the garden it inspired, would continue teaching others about the delicate balance between urban development and wildlife preservation. The camera's discovery closed one chapter of their story, but opened another. The garden would now be included in official wildlife corridor studies, and their model for urban habitat restoration would be shared with other communities facing similar challenges. What began with a scared BEA, our cub finding his way into a classroom, had evolved into something none of them could have imagined, a blueprint for how communities can rebuild their connections with the natural world. Tom carefully placed the camera in a box for return to the wildlife department, but its footage had already served its most important purpose. It had revealed that sometimes the most unexpected encounters aren't random at all. They're nature's way of showing us how to make things right.